watch and discuss the horrific, the obscure, and the flat-out strange from the other side of cinema. I am Mark Dickerson.
And I'm Jeremy Fink.
This is episode 2, and today we are going to dive deeper into the films of Peter Jackson. We're going to continue part 1, which is the early films of Peter Jackson. Last time we took a look at the first film that he produced, Bad Taste. Today, we're going to take a look at his second film, Meet the Feebles.
Put your hands together for the Fabulous Feebles Variety Hour.
Meet the Feebles, meet the Feebles. We're not your average, ordinary people. Meet the Feebles, meet the Feebles.
Animal acts
And other attractions.
to let the pussy will show you some action.
A contortionist,
And more than this,
a hippopotamus. Unconditionally guaranteed to send you when you meet the Feebles. Meet the Feebles. We're not your average, ordinary people. Meet the Feebles. Meet the Feebles.
All right, so what you just heard was the intro song to Jackson's 1989 follow-up to 1987's Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles. Initially, Jackson really wanted to make what ended up being his third film, which was called Dead Alive, also known as Brain Dead. He wanted that to be the follow-up to Bad Taste, but after failing to put together funding, he ended up landing on a very, very strange film called Meet the Feebles.
Yes, Meet the Feebles is basically a demented, perverse take on the Muppets, with all kinds of disgusting imagery, debauchery, and, of course, drugs. A little bit of everything, I would say. It's definitely a black comedy. It is also a musical, as you just heard the main song there, which is very catchy, by the way. I actually found myself singing it afterwards.
Yeah, a lot of good music. A lot of good music in this one, actually.
There is a lot of good music, yeah. And I love musicals, which I'm sure will come up later again on the show, but so that's just an added thing for me. So yeah, Meet the Feebles is, like I said, basically the Muppets if they were all on drugs and having sex with each other and trying to kill each other.
You mean they're not, right? They're not doing that, the Muppets?
Apparently not.
Apparently
I mean,
not.
we might have to look into that a bit, but so they're running their own show. I believe it's opening night for the show in the movie. It's kind of the main, the core of the film. Like
The Feebles, that is, right? The Feebles.
The Feebles, yes. What everything's leading up to. And of course, they have all kinds of animals and all kinds of, I think there's actually, besides puppets, there's also actors in suits, I believe, for some of the roles. But yeah, a lot of puppetry. There's the main character of Robert the Hedgehog, who's kind of like, we kind of see everything through his eyes. He's like the naive newcomer. And he's sort of the main character, although the movie kind of just goes around to different characters. And it is the type of film where every scene has something in it that just kind of stands out, and you kind of can't point to any one scene. Although there is one specific scene, which I'll talk about later, that I think probably does stand above the rest. But
Yes.
yeah, I mean, every scene is really just, these puppets doing something bad. And while that may sound like a one-note kind of, novelty, I found it really worked. I don't know. How did you feel about this one?
Yeah, so I actually really love this film. It might have, in the episode we're doing today, or the part 1 rather, the early ones, it might actually be my surprising favorite of the 3. And
I think I would have to agree with that. Actually.
Yeah, it's just so off the wall. I'm also have a real soft spot in my heart for backstage dramas. And this is even though it maybe dives into some stereotypes, in terms of the characters and the backstage drama, I think a good way to describe this one would maybe be like the dirty red shoes. It puts you behind the scenes of this very strange, fun variety show with all of these animals, these talking animals, these people in seats. We have so the big boss, the big producer is a guy named Bletch, who's a walrus. We have his one-time love interest, but now kind of fading romance, Heidi the hippo. There's a drug-addicted frog knife thrower named Weinard, who is a Vietnam veteran. There's really some complex characters, and I think if this was something that had been done with just normal human beings, it might have actually just seemed like a very kind of uh, straight, intense backstage drama, but because it's set in this strange cartoonish, not unlike Bad Taste, this strange cartoonish world, it kind of brings it to a different level of strange, disturbing, strange, disturbing content.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the way I look at it is that it's like a parody of those types of films in a way. It's very satirical. It's like a commentary on like celebrity gossip culture, dark, the dark side of
Fly.
stardom.
There's a fly in the film who I believe is named FW, but I could be wrong on that. I think it's FW. Yeah, FW, who is he's a gossip columnist, kind of right out of someone you would see in maybe the 1940s and 50s old Hollywood kind of system, where he's just getting into everything they get into, everything all the actors and performers in this musical variety show get into. The fly gets he's literally a fly on the wall and observes and writes about it. It's a pretty interesting, lots of crazy characters like that.
Yeah, and we'll get into specifics of what we really like about the film and the different moments. But first, I wanted to talk about a little bit of the background. Obviously, it's an extremely low budget film, much like Bad Taste. I'm sure they had a bit more money for this one.
This one was $750,000 is the number
yeah.
that I found.
And
So a little bit more.
apparently it was originally conceived as part of a television series, but it actually became a feature once Japanese investors asked them to expand on the idea, I guess.
Which is an interesting thing. It's a sign of the times, where today it would probably be the opposite, where if they wanted to make some serious money, they'd turn it into a TV show.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That is very true. So they hastily rewrote the script and they made it into this feature, which, it was a commercial failure when it first came out, when it was first released. But obviously, we're talking about it now on this show, so it went on to become a cult film.
Cult film?
Yes, and this is kind of exemplifies cult films for me. I mean, it's a bizarre musical with odd, practical effects, and I mean, it's everything about it. Just you would never picture anything like this in theaters now, or anything that would be mainstream, at least.
No, not at all.
No, yeah, and again with the effects and Bad Taste, just all the work that went into making the puppets. I mean, I watched behind the scenes footage of this as well, and there was actually an example of the walrus character just walking over to a desk and sitting down. And Peter Jackson was saying that's something that would normally be one shot in a film, in a normal film, but for this film it would be at least three separate shots, moving, trying to move the puppet around and get them to sit right. And so if you just think about that, it's actually very impressive what went into to making this movie.
Yeah, it does rather look like a logistical nightmare when you really take a look at it.
There's a lot going on too. Like in each scene, if you look in the background, there's like lots of moving parts, so to speak, going on, like all around. It's craziness ensuing in every scene.
Yeah, it's basically a life-size puppet show, which but just really like a lot of movement, for puppets, a lot of crazy stuff going on. There's a knife throwing scene, there's people hanging from the rafters, there's one infamous scene which the movie's kind of now most known for, where there's this kind of extreme violent catharsis at the end. And a lot of this, though, is attributed to the brilliance in the puppeteering work in this, and the creation of these puppets is attributed to two people named Richard Taylor and Tanya Rogers, who Jackson was working with for the first time on this film. So Richard Taylor and Tanya Rogers went on to create a company called Weta Workshops. And Weta Workshops has actually worked with Jackson all the way through his every single film since Meet the Feebles to today. So they were the people who were responsible for creating the orcs, the huge orc armies, and all of the strange, effects and everything that have carried straight through all of his extreme films, small to large.
That's loyalty right there, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And you mentioned first time working with them was also the first film that Jackson co-wrote with his future wife, Fran Walsh. She went on to be a co-writer on his films after that as well. Also, another connection to Bad Taste is Jackson's actually has a cameo as a Bad Taste alien. He's in the audience, which you have to kind of pause it to see that. But yeah, it's a fun little tidbit there. I actually found it interesting, and it makes sense when you look back at Jackson's earlier films, that he originally wanted to be a special effects guy. He had mentioned that in one of the interviews from the documentary I was watching, and that just totally makes sense. I mean, these first three films especially are just special effects first, story and everything after that, sure. but they're really just vehicles for these practical effects.
Yeah. But what's interesting about Meet the Feebles, I think, as compared to Bad Taste and Dead Alive, is the humanity, oddly enough, that's present in this film. There are some, even though we're looking at puppets, there's some real emotion present. You really feel for these little guys, even though the situations are kind of insane. For example, like I said, there's the drug addict frog who is a Vietnam veteran, and there's a really wonderful reference to Deer Hunter, a strange little scene.
Of course.
Which a fun fact, I learned that the Deer Hunter stuff was actually, they ran out of money, so that was actually a lot of the Deer Hunter stuff was funded by crew members and Jackson himself. And I forget, it was originally shot. I'll see if I can find it. It was shot under a different name.
I think I saw that as well. It was the Frogs of War.
Frogs of War, yeah. So that's a fun little factoid right there. But there is really a lot of human emotion present in this film, which is strange for something that's just is so effects heavy.
Just going to like a more personal note, I saw this movie when I was much younger, probably around, I don't know, I guess around 1920, something like that, and it kind of blew my mind. It's oddly watchable and fascinating in a way. It has a very abstract feel to it. And again, like I said, something that should be like a one-note joke, it takes on a life of its own, and it goes lots of interesting places. It's kind of better than it has a right to be.
Yeah.
In a way, you know what I mean? If that
it.
makes sense. Yeah. Or than most people would expect. Partly because the puppet work is so impressive for such a low budget feature, but also just like you said, like the characters are kind of like human in a way that you don't see in many films actually. Like there's different levels to their performances, which are just these puppets, but the way they acted with them is it just brings a different level to it.
Yeah, and there's a real sense of culture in this movie as well. If you talk about if you think about a movie maybe like a Broadway Danny Rose, or a lot like a Gilda or something like that.
Yeah.
These old classic Hollywood films. Those movies are right in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think
have that feel.
Yeah, which I think maybe is what helps it hold up over time. Because, like you said, this maybe is better than it has. It does hold up particularly well, even where are we now? All these years later. And I think another thing that we'd be amiss if we didn't talk about though is the music in this film.
Oh, definitely. I mean, like I said, I'm a big fan of musicals, and this one, combined with the dark humor, just really, the songs are good too. I mean,
yeah.
And I like how the film starts with a fun song and dance, and then immediately turns it on its head once the song is over, and you're watching something different, and you're going into like some kind of dark territory.
Yeah. No, it does go in a really interesting direction.
But it does have that kind of old-fashioned Broadway feel to it, which you were talking about.
Yeah, there was one little bit I noticed just because the music is so present in our culture now. There's one bit when we're following around our main character, Robert, where the music bears a strange resemblance to La La Land, which I thought was kind of interesting. Which I'm not making a claim, obviously, that Damien Chazelle or Justin Hurwitz at any point saw Meet the Feebles and used that as inspiration, but it does have that kind of Jacques Demy, like this loner lost in this musical, beautiful world feel to it. And then you see a frog mainlining heroin, and then a walrus getting a blowjob from a rabbit, and it gets in a very strange direction.
Well, they actually explore some of the same themes, oddly enough, I would say.
Yeah.
Just celebrity culture and stardom, trying to achieve that goal and all that.
Yeah, that longing. And also
exactly.
artistic integrity. There's a really interesting character who is a director who really wants to pull off his big artistic vision, but just kind of keeps being put down by this producer type, by Bletch, the big producer. Which once again, really interesting. As a young creator, I personally really felt for that. Granted, the vision of the director, once he actually gets an opportunity through some unforeseen circumstances to perform it, is a little bit lurid.
Right.
But there's a lot of heart in this film. As we talk about the heart in this film, though, we can't forget, though, it is also incredibly lurid and incredibly dangerous.
Yes.
which all of that leads up to one huge climactic scene at the end, which I think we should talk about a little bit.
A hippo with a machine gun running around just slaughtering everyone that you've just seen in the film. That image is still very disturbing, and it really stays with you probably more than any other scene in the film. I would think. I mean, that's when I think back on this film from seeing it years ago. I mean, that's what I think of. And especially like the climate, not to get political or anything, but the climate we live in today, it's still, it actually might even be more shocking to see that in a film now. These characters that you've just like watched throughout the entire film are just getting, just mowed down. And he obviously is making commentary on it, with how everything ends up, that she gets rehabilitated and works a checkout line in a grocery store,
Yeah.
But what did you
Yeah, no, I mean, that moment
that
moment for me was incredibly cathartic. We're referring to Heidi the hippo kind of losing it. But it's interesting, you hear these stories of kind of this Hollywood fallout. My favorite is a story I heard about an actress named Peg Entwistle, I believe, who was an early Hollywood actress and actually ended up jumping off the H in the Hollywood sign.
Yes.
So I think what's crazy about this film is, even though we're dealing with this extreme fiction, it's just how true these stories ring out. And I think this is a movie, as strange as it is to see, is kind of a quintessential Hollywood film, even if it's not necessarily set in Hollywood. I think in terms of anyone getting into show business, this is a valuable piece of art to look at.
Yeah, and what I actually forgot was how much the whole film kind of leads up to that scene in a way. Like, it's almost all all the things that occurred to Heidi the hippo, and everything that happens along the course of the film is just like all culminates in that ending. And cathartic is kind of the right word for it. It's interesting.
Yeah, you feel it.
It's horrific, yeah, but you can feel it definitely. But if I had to pick, a single scene that stood out, that would have to be it. But I mean, every scene in it has something shocking going on, and I think every form of human excrement makes an appearance of some kind.
Oh, my goodness.
It's just the scene with the whale also stands out to me, when they essentially drive through a whale. And that whale puppet is very impressive. It actually reminds me of the Little Shop of Horrors Audrey 2 puppet in a way. So yeah, I mean, just all around very different than Bad Taste. Looking back on it, I was actually surprised at how quite ambitious and different it was than his first film.
But it was an interesting departure from Bad Taste. However, in a review I found from 1995, which is a couple of years after the film was released, but I don't believe that Meet the Feebles immediately made its way to the United States. I don't think it had the same kind of presence. I think with a lot of Jackson's films, actually, that they were successful in their time with the early films, but I think once Lord of the Rings came out and Heavenly Creatures and a lot of his more recent bigger work, people started going back. So I was able to find a 1995 review from the New York Times. I believe that Meet the Feebles was showing at Film Forum, and Janet Maslin of the New York Times was quoted as saying, "Had Mr. Jackson not already used up the title Bad Taste on an earlier film, it would have fit Meet the Feebles well." Which is interesting, that even though it is such a departure, it's clear that Jackson is still trying to just have fun at this point in his career. Do whatever he can that's shocking, off the wall, that he hasn't seen before.
That same energy from carries over, definitely. I mean, you might be able to call any of his first three films, I would say, probably Bad Taste.
Bad Taste,
would be a fitting title, yeah. Just my final thoughts on Meet the Feebles. I'm a huge fan of dark humor, so I appreciate the look and the tone that he was going for, and I appreciate all the work that went into the practical effects, of course. And though it's disturbing and somewhat gross, I think it's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely not for the faint of heart on this one. I would say even more so than Bad Taste. I think somehow, like we said, even though this one is set in this puppet world, it's somehow maybe more real than Bad Taste is.
Somehow.
But I think this one, like I said earlier, would definitely make a good double feature with something like The Red Shoes or La La Land, as strange as that is. So if you ever get the opportunity to watch those movies, definitely swing this one into your repertoire of showbiz backstage dramas.
I would go to that double feature, that's for sure.
I would too. La La Land and Meet the Feebles.
It'd be something. One final thing here. I just wanted to mention that there's a making of Meet the Feebles, which I found on YouTube. It's called Sex, Drugs, and Soft Toys. And we're going to put a link in the description for this episode. The Meet the Feebles documentary is not very good quality, and the one I found was actually in 3 different parts, but it's worth checking out just if you're curious at all how they made this film. And I like that at one point he actually refers to this film as a slice of cake rather than a slice of life film, which I found interesting.
That's a Hitchcock quote, right? I don't make slices of life, I make slices of cake.
Which totally fits this film, I would
Totally
say.
fits it. Yeah.
Revolting cake, but
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Cult Movie Cult. We just took a look at Meet the Feebles, and next time we're going to continue with our exploration of Peter Jackson's early films, continuing with the early films, and we're going to finish that part out with the film Dead Alive. And I'm very much looking forward to talking about that one. All right, well, thanks for joining us again here on Cult Movie Cult, where we explore the horrific, the obscure, and the flat-out strange from the other side of cinema. Thank you, and see you next time from the other side.